Hello, thank you to everyone who's joining us today. We're excited to have you here online and want to remind you that this is being recorded live, and if for some reason you need to step away from your desk or your phone, not to worry. We're going to be recording the entire webinar and sending out a link for you to watch later, or you can re-listen to it at your leisure. We're very excited to be joined by Hallie Crawford today, who's going to be sharing 3 simple steps to find fulfillment in your career. I love this topic, and I feel like this is such a great time of year as we're in the beginning of fall. If you live in the Southeast, it doesn't feel like it, but we are definitely back in the swing of things as far as work and school. And this is a good time to kind of think about, how fulfilled are you right now? Do you want to start trying to make some small changes along the way before we get to the end of the year and really kind of look at your past year and the year going forward. So thank you for joining us. We do have a question box in the GoToWebinar window pane, so please submit your questions throughout the presentation, and I will ask this to Hallie at the end. So anytime if you have any clarification or if you need anything, just type those away, and we'll get those answered as best we can toward the end. My name is Lane Convulcani. I'm the Senior Associate Director of Alumni Learning with the Emory Alumni Association. I'm based here in Atlanta, Georgia at the Miller Ward Alumni House, just across from the main campus. And really excited to bring this webinar to you, and would love to know any other topics that would be of interest. We've really broadened this program and are hoping to meet alumni where they are in their career. If you're a recent grad, if you're mid-career, or if you're looking at your encore career, just let us know what you would like help with. This is a great resource to Emory alumni, and we have amazing, fabulous career coaches who have decades of experience that they want to share with you all. So anything at all, shoot me an email and let me know, hey, I'd love to hear about work-life balance or, kind of positioning yourself as a leader. Let me know, and we'll get that on the calendar to get out to you. So without further ado, I do want to introduce Hallie Crawford, our career coach. She is a certified career coach and a national career expert based here in Atlanta. Her company, HallieCrawford.com, and her team of coaches have helped thousands of people worldwide identify and transition into their dream career, effectively navigating their job search and enhancing their performance at work. She is regularly featured as an expert in the media, including U.S. News, Forbes, the Wall Street Journal, CNN, and Fox Business News. We're delighted to have Hallie with us today, and with that, I will turn it over to Hallie. Thanks for being here, Hallie.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and everyone for taking time on what is most likely, at least for most of us, your lunch hour. So greatly appreciate your time today. So as Lane said, I'm Hallie Crawford. I am a certified career coach. I'm based in Atlanta, Georgia, and have undergrad and graduate degrees from Vanderbilt University and the University of Illinois. And I have actually been coaching and training for just over 18 years. It will be 19 years next year in March. I know I sound like I'm 12. I'm actually 46, and absolutely love what I do. So I'm thrilled to be here with you all today to talk about the simple steps to find fulfillment in your career. And I do agree that this is a perfect time to be thinking about this, because whether it's, okay, what are the changes I can make for the rest of for my career or current job for the rest of this year, that's a great way to think about it. But it's also good if you decide, gosh, I need to make a career change or a transition, for you to be thinking about that in preparation for the new year. So as I said, I absolutely love what I do and feel like I'm meant to do it. But one of the first things I wanted you all to know, and I'll pull up this next slide here, is that it wasn't always like that. I do know firsthand how it feels to not feel fulfilled in your career. This is me on the far left here on the slide with my mom and my sister. When I graduated from Vanderbilt, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I actually spent about 5 years, give or take, jumping around from job to job, feeling like I was checking things off the list of, okay, nope, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do that, instead of really figuring out what my career path was. And part of why I share this with you is I vividly remember how painful that time was for me, because it's one of those times in my life, which I'm sure you all can understand, when something is really poignant, either joyful or really painful for you. This was a really painful time in my life. I was depressed, and I was actually living in my mother's basement. I had no idea what I wanted to do career-wise, and it was really beating up on my confidence. I didn't feel I had anything to, bring to a prospective employer, much less, knew what I wanted to do in the first place. So I do understand how this feels, and this is what I do and all of my coaches do all day long, is help people figure that out and get out of that rut. And we all feel on my team like we have a great sense of purpose in what we do, and that's why we're here today, to help you figure that out as well. The tips that I'm going to share with you today are ones that we actually use all the time with our clients. And one of the things I wanted to share with you is at the very top of this next slide here is to get the right perspective about figuring out your career path. Because I think when clients come to us, a lot of times they think, okay, like I need to figure out what my career path is, and there's got to be this one thing, like a needle in a haystack or a bright shining object on a hill, and if I just figure out what that one thing is, everything will be great. It's not like that, and it's also not like Pollyanna, like wave a magic wand and everything is perfect. We always hear, do what you love and the money will follow, right? Well, yeah, right. That's not how it happens. It is hard work. It took me a lot of years and a lot of hard work to get to where I am in terms of my career path and my business. And yes, there are some days that I would rather sleep in and be independently wealthy than go to work, right? But as hard as I work, it actually doesn't feel like work for me. It balances and centers me, and I do love what I do, like I said. So I want you all to get the right perspective also in terms of what you're looking for to have fulfillment or have the right career fit is you want to be thinking that the good parts about your job so far outweigh the bad parts that you don't like as much that you barely notice them, okay? Because here's the deal with this. There are things that we all don't want to do in our jobs. That's just par for the course. There are things that I don't want to do. Spreadsheets, my P&L, my financials for my business, not my forte, not my favorite thing, but it's a necessary evil. I need to do it. So there's always going to be things that we don't like in our jobs. What you want to think about and start to identify is what is a career path that the good stuff about what I'm doing all day, every day, so far outweighs the bad things that I don't like as much that I barely notice them. That's the more realistic perspective to take on this. And also, it will take a little bit of the pressure off, if you will, of finding the one exact right thing. There are probably several different kind of similar or related career paths that could be a good fit for you. I could be a coach at an organization, and I would probably really enjoy it. But for me, being a business owner, there's an element of that as well that I like, the flexibility, the independence, and everything else, okay? So here's our agenda for today. After you get the kind of right perspective to take on this, as I said, what we're going to talk about today after you do that is to define fulfillment and how do we need to do that? Give you some tools to figure out how you can define fulfillment for yourself. That's our first step. The second step is to take a look at and closely review our ideal career model. And I'll talk a little bit more about this as we go today. But to look at our ideal career model, to consider the 8 different pieces that you need to really understand about yourself in order to know the right career path and brainstorm the right career ideas. And then finally, step number 3 is going to be expanding your thinking and how to do that. We have a very specific career brainstorming process that has 4 steps kind of incorporated into it, and I will share what that is with you so that you know what the websites are that you can leverage and use to start brainstorming career ideas and how to go about that. By the way, just quick admin item before we keep going. If any of you would also, in addition to the recording, like a copy of the PowerPoint slides so that you don't feel like you have to be frantically taking notes, I totally get that. Feel free to email us at admin@halliecrawford.com. I would be happy to share those with you, and we'll just email them to you. All right, so first of all, why is it important to talk about this topic in the first place? The reason why it's important is on this slide. Too many people are still not in the right fit, and I want you to think about where you fall on these 3 kind of inside of each of these categories at the bottom here of the slide, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But there's still too many people that are not in the right fit and are unsatisfied with their career path. Recent Gallup poll said that 85% of people are unsatisfied at work. These surveys and these polls come out every few years, and obviously I pay attention to them because of what I do. And unfortunately, the numbers of people out there that are still unsatisfied at work, they're still pretty high. And it's really important because we spend so much of our time at work that it's just so critically important to at least feel like you have some sense of purpose, meaning, satisfaction, or a sense of accomplishment at your career long term. And obviously, that's why we're here today. The next thing I want you all to kind of think about here is I want you to kind of set your goal in order to start this process of defining fulfillment and thinking about the right job for you, is set a goal based on where you feel you fall within these three different categories here on the slide. Okay, so first of all, the majority of you probably are not in the very satisfied category, which is why you're here, which I get. But for any of you that may fall in this category or know friends or family that do, if you do feel pretty satisfied, one of the things that we encourage our clients to do is to make sure that you find ways to remain challenged over time. Because even those of us like me who thoroughly enjoy what they do, we can still get bored and not want to do our coaching the same way all the time. So I'll mix it up with group coaching, with webinars like this, etc. So when you are, very satisfied, or at least satisfied in general, you still need to make sure that you find ways to remain challenged in order to keep that satisfaction level. If any of you feel like you're kind of 50-50, you're somewhat satisfied and you're not really sure maybe if you are in the right career fit or not, you're on the fence about it, one of the things we encourage you to do is to separate what works and what doesn't. What works for you at your current career path and at your current job, and what doesn't work. And then start to identify from that, what can you change? What can you change at your current job? Is there anything that you can do where you are now to start to make adjustments that could make it better? We always encourage our clients to look in their own backyard just in case, because obviously that would be easier than completely changing careers or conducting a job search. And then finally, if you fall into the category of very unsatisfied, obviously we want you to determine and define the right fit. But one of the things I wanted to say about this piece is the timeline that you want to give yourself in order to really determine the right career path. You need to give yourself a little bit of time. This isn't a light switch where it happens overnight. We typically tell our clients, give yourself between 3 and 4 months at a minimum in order to define the right career path, to do the right self-reflection and the thinking to make this happen, to conduct the informational interviews with other people in career paths that you're considering, to really finalize what that right fit may be. You do need to give yourself some time. So around 4 months, give or take at a minimum, is what we typically recommend when clients are working with us, for example, and using our ideal career workbook. So here's the good news. So the bad news was too many people are unfulfilled. The good news is that you can find direction and fulfillment, okay? 98% of our clients, they find their career direction. They are very, very happy with what the work that they've done with us. And one of the things I wanted to share on this slide as well to everyone is that I want you to also keep in mind that a lot of our clients as well, and I think this is common for the majority of people out there, I would say between like 70 to 75% of our clients, they make less of a dramatic career change than they think they needed to when they first came to us. So you are probably closer to the right career path than you think you are. You just may feel so frustrated and unhappy because it's been so long, let's say, that you've been unhappy and unsatisfied, that it feels like, oh my gosh, I need to go be a circus clown, or like something completely different, right? One of our clients, when she came to us, she was a consultant at Ernst & Young in Chicago, and she literally said to me, I think I need to be a chef. Like, I just am so burned out, can't stand it anymore. But when we dug into the process with her and walked through the career model with her, she started to realize that it was actually more about her work environment versus the actual job, and not her colleagues or her employees that she managed. It was more about her boss. So she determined that, in addition to leaving the company and, her boss, she wanted to be an internal consultant instead. And so instead of doing external consulting with all the traveling, et cetera, internal consulting was going to be better life balance for her as well as the right work environment. So for her, she was actually a lot closer than she realized. So keep that in mind. And when you are, if we take a look at this next slide, when you're brainstorming different ideas, career ideas, and when you're writing down and beginning to develop a list of wants, which is one of the first things that we want you to do, we want you to realize that if you're coming up with and kind of gravitating to things that are similar to what you're doing now, that doesn't mean that's a bad thing. Hopefully, you all chose your jobs, your current position, and your career path for a reason. Most people, ideally, don't go into a job saying, I'm going to hate this job. Let me go ahead and take it, right? That's usually not the case. There are things that drew you to what you're doing right now in the first place, okay? So don't feel badly or think that you're doing something incorrectly if most of the ideas that you're brainstorming are similar or related to what you're doing now. So here's our quick little bonus tip before we get into our 3 steps, and I'll explain why this mermaid is on the slide here as well. So the first thing that we have our clients do when we're having them work on their career direction and defining their ideal career path is we have them develop first, right out of the box, a list of wants, a list of things that they want to have in an ideal job based on the things that they've liked in their past positions and that they have not liked in their past positions. So from the likes and dislikes from past jobs, even from classes they took in college at Emory or any board, member positions that you've been on or projects you've worked on, think about that as well, because we have had clients come up with career ideas based on volunteer work they did in the past. So come up with a list of those wants. And part of this, or as part of this, we want you to dig underneath your dreams, your interests, and your passions. So even if, for example, a hobby for you is not practical or realistic for you to pursue as a career because it won't pay you enough, or it's going to take too long to grow that business, and, I wouldn't be a good business owner, whatever it is, think about underneath, like, what draws you to that? What is appealing about it for you? Why do you enjoy that hobby? Because elements of why you enjoy that hobby are things that you could incorporate into a career path. Creativity, for example, freedom and independence. It could be like that you want to create something beautiful or create experiences for other people, or you really like math and working with numbers, whatever it is. So the reason why this mermaid is on the slide is because when I started to think about, and consider being a career coach, when I looked back at things that, a dream that I had as a child, I grew up in Florida and I wanted to be a mermaid at Weeki Wachee. I thought that was the coolest thing going. Obviously, that's not the most practical thing, and it doesn't make sense for me for a lot of different reasons. It's not the right work environment, et cetera, okay? But when I thought about why that was appealing to me in the first place is a lot of why I enjoy being a coach today. It's the beauty and creativity of it. It's the entertaining people and educating people to a certain extent. And that's part of why I love doing webinars like this. And then the other element of it is, for me as a kid, looking at that seemed kind of like risky. And one of my values is actually risk. It's one of the reasons why being a business owner actually works for me, because I like taking risks. It's one of my values, a personal value and a career value. And I like snow skiing, for example, and I like horseback riding. Both of those honor that value of risk. And we're going to talk a little bit more about values in a moment here. So we want you to dig underneath those dreams, interests, and passions, because there could be clues to things that you want and also possible values that you may need to put on your list. So our first step as part of defining and figuring out, fulfillment in our careers is obviously defining what fulfillment means to us personally, by the way, and professionally. So one of the things that I wanted to share as you're thinking about fulfillment, and we'll start looking at this ideal career model as well, is we always start with the fulfillment piece of this model when we are helping people identify their correct career path or their ideal career path. So this basically is our ideal career model that shows you the 8 different things that you need to consider and understand about yourself and how you define it for yourself in order to know the right career path. We start with fulfillment here on the bottom right, and that is your values. What would give you a sense of accomplishment and reward or satisfaction in your work? We look at enjoyment. We look at what your strengths are, your past education. That can help us get some career ideas based on classes that you took at Emory or elsewhere, past experience, your personality type, and what that means in terms of the right role for you and the right work environment and compensation. We will talk about this model a little bit more just in a few minutes, but we start with fulfillment first with all of our clients, okay? It's the cornerstone of everything else. Fulfillment impacts every other piece of the model, which is why we start with it first. It's also the hardest thing for clients to identify, okay? So that's why we begin with it as well, because if they can get that in place, they're going to actually brainstorm career ideas right out of the box based on what their values are. And also, if you have a sense of fulfillment and reward in your career, that's going to sustain you through the ups and downs that we all inevitably will have during the course of our career path. And finally, the fulfillment piece gives us the greatest clarity about their career direction, people's career direction, versus just looking at their talents and skills. People make mistakes when they choose a career path, for example, saying, okay, well, I'm going to be good at this and it's going to pay me a lot of money, so okay, I'll go for it. If you forget about the work environment, or you forget about, oh, I just put myself into a job where I'm forced to be more extroverted, for example, and I'm actually more introverted, it's not going to work for you. So all of these pieces are critically important. So let's talk a little bit more on this next slide about how to define fulfillment and how to do that first. So here on the slide are some examples of what we would recommend to help you begin to define fulfillment for you. So number one is to start to journal about and write down, before you go to bed tonight, what does success mean to you? Define what success means to you at this point in your life. What does success mean? Is it about the money? Is it about the life balance? Is it I have time with my kids? Whatever it is, start to write about that, because that can give you clues to things that you will put on your list of wants in an ideal job. You want to start to look at and identify what your interests are and look at them closer, as we talked about before. Look at them more closely to say, okay, what are the things that when I do them, either in my personal life, but also things that I do at work now or in the past where I've lost track of time? What are those examples? And what are the common threads between those things that give me ideas about things that I might want? Is it that I'm doing financial analysis? Is it that I'm, planning events for someone? Whatever it is, you want to identify what those interests are, but things personally and professionally, everyone, look at both, that you lose track of time. The next thing that you can think about is to just kind of noodle on and give yourself some free-flowing time when you're walking your dog or exercising the next time, whatever it is. What would be your ideal day at work, and what would be those qualities that you would put down? This is another way to kind of come at it and ask yourself this question. And then the final and most critical way to help you define fulfillment is to identify your top 3 career values by doing what we call a peak experience exercise. Okay, and I'll give you an example of this in a moment, and then we'll get to our first poll here in just a few minutes. Lena, I'll let you know when we're ready for that. So in order to identify your career values, everyone, one of the things that we encourage you to do is to identify a peak experience in your life. And when I say your life, I mean in your personal life. Start with the personal first. Because what we have found is when you start with the personal first and identify what your personal values might be and then translate those over to career values, you're going to get much closer to something that truly means something for you versus, okay, well, these are the career values that I think I should have, so I'll put them on the list. No, it's better to start with you first in the personal. So a peak experience would be something in your personal life. It could be a moment in time, or it could be a period of time. Either one of those, but it's a time when you felt on top of the world. Things were rocking and rolling, flowing in all cylinders, where you just felt great. An example of one of our clients had when he was the editor of the high school yearbook. That was a peak moment or experience for him. And so we picked that apart. Once you identify your peak experience, tell a friend or family member, a career coach like us, about that peak experience and have them help you pick out what your values are. So I'll give you an example. So you could have 2 people, for example, that had a trip to Italy as their peak experience. But one person, when they talk about their trip to Italy, they may be talking about, gosh, I loved the planning of it and the logistics and figuring out how much time we should spend at each place so we could create a good experience. But I loved kind of running the numbers for our budget and the logistics and everything else. And a completely different person, same trip to Italy, even maybe the same locations, might say, I loved going there because of the food and the beauty of the art and the architecture. And they talk nothing about like how much time I spent in one place or the budget or anything else. So that the first person, logistics, working with numbers, budgeting and finance, planning, operations, those are some possible values that may be true for that first person. The second person, it may be more like, no, I love creating something beautiful. Or they might be like, I love good food because I love, relationships with other people and food brings people together. That could be one of their values. So you really need to give some thought to this exercise is the bottom line. And sharing it with someone else is enormously helpful, everyone, because they can help you pick out things that you may miss or otherwise overlook. So we're curious here if we can go ahead and do this first poll, Lane. That would be great. I'm curious how many people on the call today feel like they know what their career values are. Go ahead and answer that for us. And Lane, if you could share with me the results, I can never figure out where they are. That'd be great. And great if you do, that's fantastic. We'll show you what to do with them. And it's okay if you don't, because now you've got some tools to figure it out. So we'll give you a moment here to do that.
Yep, we've got good number of people responding. We'll give it just another couple of seconds.
Awesome.
Okay, pretty close. It looks like 60% do not know their values and 40% do.
Okay. All right, good. So we've got sort of an even split or close to that. That's fantastic. Please know for any of you or everyone that answered that you're not alone, that there's plenty of people that either do know them or don't know them, okay? I would encourage everyone who feels like they do to still do this exercise because, by the way, your values can change over time, especially with life circumstances and situations. And by the way, when you're starting to identify what your personal values are from this peak experience like we were talking about, if for the most part, because our clients always ask us this, so I did want to mention it, if for the most part your personal values, they translate over to your career values, meaning most of your career values are also your personal values, that's okay. It doesn't mean you did anything wrong. There may be one or two that you leave behind just in personal, and that's how it is for me. But just know that if most of them move over or translate over, that's totally okay. And for those of you that feel like, gosh, I need a little bit more help with this or anything else we're talking about today, please feel free to schedule a free career strategy session. I do offer those. Happy to talk with you all for a few minutes about what's going on with your unique situation, help you identify what some of your values are. It's a lot easier for someone objective to do it for you, especially someone like me who's been doing it for so long. So happy to help you with that. Don't hesitate to email us at admin@halliecrawford.com. For step number 2, let's go ahead and look at and review the ideal career model. So we're going to stay on this slide for a few minutes here because I really want to focus on the model, and then we'll get to our third step. So as I showed you before, we start with fulfillment first, and I gave you the different ways and steps that you can begin to define what fulfillment means to you. By the way, if you're one of those people that's like, gosh, I don't need to feel like passionate about my job, Hallie, I just want to, enjoy it and have some sense of satisfaction or accomplishment. That's totally okay. It all depends on how you define the word quote unquote fulfillment to you, okay? The next thing that we have you look at, though, is after fulfillment, is we have you look at enjoyment. And a lot of people are like, okay, what's the difference here? The difference here is fulfillment should be the core tasks that you are supposed to perform in your job. Like for me, I'm a career coach. Yes, there's lots of other things that I do. I do marketing, I do sales, especially in terms of my business. And there will be other things that you will do as a lawyer as well. For example, you'll do admin work, you may do some mentoring, whatever it is. So fulfillment is supposed to be the core of what you're supposed to do for your job, your main task, if you will. The enjoyment piece is the icing on the cake. And here's why I bring this one up. For me, and I'll use me as an example, I actually enjoy marketing and I like and enjoy writing and editing articles. But guess what? Because I enjoy those things, I used to have a marketing and writing job for years. And that was the last job that I had where I was actually crying in the bathroom several days a week for the last, month that I was there. I was miserable because writing and marketing should be part of what I do in my job, not the main focus. I can do career coaching all day long and not get tired of it, but marketing, writing, I'm not quite as good at those things as I am at career coaching, so it's not one of my top strengths, just by the way, and it's also not the most enjoyable thing for me. So it does matter the percentage of time that you're spending, by the way, everyone, on any given task that you are supposed to perform. So fulfillment is the core, enjoyment is the icing on the cake. Marketing, writing, I get to do that part of the time and then put it away. Strengths is obvious. What are your top strengths that you need to be leveraging all day in your career path and in your job? Studies have shown that if you are not leveraging your strengths, and by the way, the strengths that you want to be leveraging, not the ones that you're sick of and I'm really good at this, but I'm tired of doing it, that plays into enormously and impacts your sense of fulfillment at your job. If you feel like your strengths aren't being used, you're not going to feel fulfilled. We also then have clients look at experience and education. We look at these two for two reasons. Past experience can help you start to identify, okay, what did I like in the past that I want to bring forward, and what did I not like, and what's kind of the opposite of that, if you will. And then the same with education. When I started to think about and brainstorm career ideas, psychology was one of the classes I loved at Vanderbilt, and interpersonal communications. Those were two that I loved. That goes along enormously well with career coaching. I did think at one point about being a therapist, but I was like, ooh, too heavy duty for me. I was afraid I would get too upset on a regular basis. So I wanted to do something that was similar or related to it in a way, but more for people's careers where it was a little bit different, okay? You also, though, by the way, when you're considering your ideal career path, you do need to start thinking about at this point in the model, how qualified are you for these jobs? Do you have any of the educational background, or do you need to take a class or get a certification? And what kind of transferable experience do you have that you could pull forward to this new career path? So this begins when we start to get a little bit more practical and realistic and say, which of these career paths are realistic and which are just not going to happen. Personality, we touched on a little bit before. This is where you need to think about whether you're more introverted or extroverted, and how that plays into how you spend your time every day. Whether you're more of a leader or a follower, if you like to be out front or more behind the scenes. If you're more methodical, rigid, and process-oriented, let's say, or if you're more creative and think outside the box and kind of all over the place. This impacts, your personality type impacts the role that you should be playing in terms of your career path or within an organization, but it also impacts what the right work environment will be for you too. Work environment, everyone, is a make or break. As I said earlier, people can have all of these other pieces in place and everything else is perfect, but if the work environment is not working, you're out of there. It is not going to happen. So this one is a critical piece to it. Work environment is going to be whether it's more informal or formal, more, open space and interactive and team-oriented, or more solo type of work. Very important consideration. And then compensation, obviously, we do consider with our clients. So a couple of things about this one. We do not leave compensation till the end because it's the least important. It is critically important. But we don't want the compensation to hamper people's creative thinking. So as we kind of get past or start to get past the strength section of the model, we do start to think about in the back of our minds, okay, what is the compensation here, and making sure this is going to be practical and realistic for me. But we don't want you to start out with it because it will narrow down your thinking too quickly, and we really want you to do some expansive thinking at the very beginning. With compensation as well, we want you to think long term. if it's possible that, gosh, in order to make a change, I may have to take a little bit of a pay cut for a little while, but okay, I can do that for a couple of years if, because I've interviewed other people, that I know that I can basically move up pretty quickly within 2 years and get the compensation that I want. Just keep that in mind as well. Okay, so this is our ideal career model, and that's that's the direction that you take in order to identify those steps in that order, if you will. Let's talk about step number 3, and this is career brainstorming. So here's the problem that we have found with our clients in terms of career brainstorming, that there's so many factors to consider the right fit. There's those 8 different pieces that they get overwhelmed. And there's also, unfortunately, no website out there with a comprehensive list of every single possible career path that is out there. That just doesn't exist. And as a result, for people, understandably, they're really unhappy. People are unhappy, and they just become overwhelmed, and they say, forget it, I just don't know where to start. And we end up staying in our jobs for way too long because it's too overwhelming to figure out something else. Totally understand that. So our basic 4-step process is listed here on the slide. To brainstorm alternative career ideas, we have you develop a list of keywords that you can search on based on interests, values, strengths. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Then we have our clients look through general search sites like Google, Bing, etc. Then we have them look at career brainstorming sites, specific sites that are used for this purpose. And then we have them look at job boards as well. So quick example here, a client, Catherine, we were working with in Denver. One of her career ideas at the time was she really wanted to own, a bed and breakfast. Well, okay, she hadn't won the lotto, the day before, so it wasn't going to happen realistically tomorrow. But that gave her some ideas about what some of her values were. But also when she was looking into, owning or running a bed and breakfast, she actually found out that there's a whole association for bed and breakfast owners. And there was a conference coming up that she attended in South Carolina, so she could network and learn more about the industry. She also found out that there's a class that you could take to learn how to, own and run one. And also that in some cases you could make more money by being a babysitter of the inn, like going there and taking care of the bed and breakfast while the owners were out on vacation, because they take vacations too. So it's worth really brainstorming and thinking outside the box, everyone, because then also, even if a lot of those career paths are things that you don't end up choosing, it will help you feel like you've covered your bases. And you're not always wondering in the back of your mind, gosh, what if there's something else out there that I just don't know about? The second part to this career brainstorming is that you really do need to stay organized. And so this is something that you've got to keep in mind in the long run here, is when you're conducting this research, we want you to use Excel or similar software program to that, whatever works best for you, to track your keywords, to track your career ideas, websites and web pages that you want to revisit later on, and all the job requirements and the salary as well. What happens to too many people if they don't stay organized, and I get this because our clients have come back to us, is they get lost in the internet, and it's 2 hours later and they're like, oh no, I don't know where I started. So when you're working through this process, everyone, you want to do the brainstorming and the searching and copy and paste the links to the pages that you want to keep to read later on. Don't go deep into that page because you're going to lose where you started. So you can scan it, read it for a second, decide, okay, I do want to keep this and I want to read it further later on, put it in your Excel spreadsheet, and then have your last step be, I'm going to review everything in one fell swoop. Again, so you don't get lost. If you would like a copy of our job search worksheet, we have a template that we use and give to our clients that is pre-filled out and set up to be organized or help you be organized with this process. Don't hesitate to reach out to us at admin@halliecrawford.com. We'd be happy to share that with you. It is an Excel worksheet, just by the way, that you can download. Okay, so then after you've started to develop your list of keywords, kind of the overview of the websites that we want to have you do, as we said, is the general search sites like Google, the career-specific sites, and the job boards. Here are some examples of the websites we want you to look at, and then we'll talk about this process in a little bit more depth here, just so you know. We'll talk about the keywords a little bit more in just a second. But just to give you an overview of the sites, some of the career brainstorming sites that you can use and take advantage of would be mypursuit.com, onetcenter.org, myplan.com is another good website, and then Glassdoor is actually a job board, but I like that one for this kind of brainstorming as well because they give you a little bit more information about jobs than some of the basic ones like Indeed do. So the brainstorming websites are listed here on the slide. And then the job boards that we tend to like are Glassdoor, Indeed, Simply Hired. As you get more narrow in your search, everyone, please do look out for and search for industry-specific websites like idealist.org is really good for nonprofit work, foundation work, doing good work, so to speak. And then marketinghire.com, for example, is good for marketing jobs. So keep in mind that there are industry-specific websites that as you narrow down your search a little bit more, and maybe you're looking at a few specific industries, you can look for those sites to narrow down your search a little bit more. Okay, so let's take a step back here for just a moment and talk about the 4 steps here in a little bit more depth, just so you know where we're coming from. So step number 1, as we said, is to literally sit down, and this is the first thing that you do, and this is the only thing you do. You brainstorm a list of keywords. They can be based on your interests, they can be based on your values, they can be based on your skills. Financial analysis, career and data analysis, jobs and education. Like, you come up with what your keywords are that you want to search on. It could be math, it could be science, whatever it is that will help you brainstorm your different career ideas. I moved to step 2 here in this slide because these are some examples of some keywords that you might use. Okay, so if, for example, someone came to us and they were interested in similar to what I do, like counseling, I would say to them, okay, there's mentoring, there's training and development is another keyword, there's professional development you could consider. So brainstorming with someone else, by the way, to come up with your list of keywords is a really good thing. So the second step after you have come up with your list of keywords is to search on the general search site. Search sites, I just use Google because that's easiest. I usually don't go past page 1, okay, on the Google search. This helps you cast a wider net, though, and find out, not just what's out there in terms of job openings, because now Google will pull up job openings from job boards for you, but also in case there's articles or directories online that talk about, for example, when I was working with a client once, she found a directory of, okay, these are the specialties. If you're going to become a psychologist, these are specialties that most people that are available, that people will specialize in, from the University of Alabama, Birmingham, for example. So college sites actually can be really helpful for this purpose because they may give you clues like, okay, this is what you could do with this major. Well, even if you didn't major in that, it can give you possible career ideas. So Googling with these keywords is the first step. You want to make sure that as you're brainstorming your career ideas, that after you do the Google step, you start to brainstorm with friends, family, a mentor if you have one. But by the way, brainstorming with friends and family, in addition to using the general search sites, can help you come up with additional career ideas, which is a great thing to do. So we want to do our second poll here, and I'm curious, who have you brainstormed career ideas with based on this list? And it could be something else, someone else. And if you haven't with anybody at all yet, you can say none of the above, and that's okay. But just keep in mind as you're filling this out, when you're doing the general search sites kind of step of the process, you do want to talk to other people about what ideas they may have for you based on what you're finding. So go ahead and fill that out, and then Lane, if you could share the results, that'd be great.
Yes, everybody looks like they are going to their computer now.
This gives me a chance to drink some water, which I need to because I talk a lot.
All right, so it looks like 79% of people do talk to friends or family. Only 11% chose none of these. 26% have a mentor. 16% have a career coach, and 37% have a networking connection.
Oh, good. I love that. So the majority of people are brainstorming. That is fantastic. Good work, everyone. I encourage you to expand it to brainstorm with other people as well. And one of the things I wanted to bring up about this, and then we'll talk about steps 3 and 4 in the process and then get to Q&A here in a moment. But one of the things I wanted to bring up about this is while this brainstorming is incredibly helpful, and I definitely want you to do it, I also want you to go back to the model after you have brainstormed with people and go back to what you know about what's true for you. Because sometimes people have preconceived notions about what they think we should do, and we want to avoid that. So usually these people are helpful, they want to help us, and they have good intentions. But be careful about people being too opinionated and trying to push an idea on you. And also just keep in mind, too, that you want to filter it through the career model and what you know about what's important to you. You can't just go with what other people tell you. You've got to go back to you at the end of the day, okay? So step number 3 is then to take your keywords and any other ideas that friends and family have given you and plug those keywords into the brainstorming sites that we mentioned before, like myplan.com. That will help you narrow down your ideas a little bit further and also help you begin to make your ideas a little bit more real, because these career brainstorming sites, they do have on some of them specific requirements, that are required for these jobs, and salary. So it helps you get a little bit more tangible and real with your ideas about what's practical and realistic. So you want to do those next. And then our last step, step number 4 of the career brainstorming process, is to search the job boards, because then it's like, okay, really real. Like we're looking out there for what comes up. And we mentioned that we like Glassdoor and Indeed. We also like the LinkedIn job board, obviously, a lot as well. What it is worth it, by the way, to plug in your keywords like data analysis, et cetera, and job boards too, because they're not just searching for what is in the job title. That helps you search for what is in the job description as well, and this will help you come up with other possible career paths that you may not have thought even existed or that were out there, okay? So that is our 4th step for our brainstorming process, searching the job boards. Okay, so I'd like you all next, as we get to our Q&A portion, to go ahead and get out your pen and paper for me, please, and think about what we've talked about today and what is one action step you will take in the next week based on what we've discussed. Remember, we talked about defining fulfillment, and one of our examples was identifying your career values. That could be one of your steps. Number 2 was reviewing the ideal career model. And number 3 was brainstorming career ideas. So go ahead and write that down for us, because we want you to walk away with one practical, tangible step. Please know this does go in baby steps. It takes time to make this happen. And as I said, I know that it can feel overwhelming. So please know, just take one step to get the ball rolling, and it will get easier over time. If anyone feels like they need that free consultation with me, please feel free to do that. admin@HallieCrawford.com. Happy to schedule that with you. It's directly with me. Brainstorm career ideas, whatever else you need. And please, by the way, too, as we get to the Q&A, we will answer as many as we can. However, if you do have additional questions that we don't get to today, or questions that you think of weeks later that you want to ask me, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'm happy to answer those for you via email briefly. The quote I want to leave you with, as you start to plug in your questions into the chat box, please go ahead and do that now, and then Lane's going to read those out to me to get to as many as we can. This is the quote that I live by, especially when I feel like I don't want to step out of my comfort zone and I need to try something new or try something that I've been avoiding. It's the greatest risk in life is not taking one. I always have said to myself, when I'm 80, sitting on a rocking chair with my grandkids or whatever it is, do I want to say that I tried to make a change and tried to make something happen versus, nah, I just didn't bother, even if I tried it and I failed? Or do I want to tell them I did try and tried to make something happen? You know what the answer is. You want to be able to tell people that you at least tried to make something happen. Even if it's overwhelming and scary, it's worth it. Okay. So, Lane, if we could do the questions, that would be great. And if we
Yeah.
have any now, that's fine.
Yep, we have one rolling. And everybody, go ahead and submit them now, and I will ask them as you send them to the box. Our first question is, what would you suggest doing if your work environment is pitiful, but you're completely fulfilled in the rest of your job?
Great question. Okay, so one of the things I would suggest first is there anything you can do about the work environment? And while I'm not saying like, oh, suddenly I'm going to change the culture of my whole organization, I'm not saying that. But is there something that you can do to influence the environment that you're in? Like, is it your office space? Is it your immediate team? Is there something that you can do talking to your boss about it? Or can you take the lead on some sort of changes within your team, maybe that could make it better? So at least give it a shot and think about if there are things that it would be possible to do in your current work environment. If you change teams, maybe, or move to another part of the organization, could that help? At least look at that, because obviously that's the low hanging fruit. If
Yeah,
that is
that's
not going to work, oh, sorry, go ahead.
no. I was just gonna say that's a great idea. That's a tough question.
Yeah, right? And we need to, like, it's easier if you can make changes where you are. If you decide that you can't, keep in mind the example that I gave before. It may be that you just need to change to a different organization. Same role, maybe it's even a similar or sized organization, they do the same thing. But if you really can't make those changes and you feel like, gosh, I can hack it for another year, but beyond that, no way, Jose, start looking right now and start brainstorming, okay, what are some other places that I might be able to check out? Okay. So really good question. Thanks.
That's awesome. We had another question. As an introvert who hates a long commute, how should I investigate solely remote work?
Really good question. So again, is, what you do now, could you do that remotely? And by the way, could you test it out a little bit first at your current job to make sure you actually really like it? Because there's definitely pros and cons. It may sound really good now, and it's better to go in with your eyes, open about it. So if it's possible to do it where you are now, great, something to think about. One of the websites I would suggest kind of poking around on would be flexjobs.com, because they tend to have more flexible jobs, which can mean in a lot of cases more remote work. Also, oh shoot, I can't remember the name of it. It used to be MomCorps, MOMCORPS, and it's career something now. I need to look that up. But if you Google MomCorps, that's a placement agency that does like temporary to permanent work or contract-based work. Originally, it was for, working or moms that, had a professional degree and wanted to get back into the workforce, but it's for everyone, which is why they changed their name. So definitely check that out, because that is typically remote work as well, but still very rewarding, high level, work like lawyers, accountants, etc. So that's another one too.
That's awesome. It looks like we have time for one more. When we're young, people say that we should just put up with how rough our first job is. And yes, we get that, but it's hard to go into your first few. How do we go about figuring out whether this is worth grinding through or not while you're beginning your career?
Gosh, that's such a great question. I wish I had thought about that more, at that age for me. So the way that you'll know is if it's the stepping stone towards the long term. So I would spend the time now, gosh, while you're younger, again, I would love to have known this earlier myself. Spend the time now figuring out what the long-term career goal is, using the model that we use today, et cetera. And then you can decide whether, okay, is this where I am now going to get me to where, can I leverage it? Can I learn the skills, get the experience, et cetera, towards what I want to do long term? And that's going to tell you whether you need to grind it out. What I will say is that everyone has to pay their dues. I had to pay my dues multiple times over. Even when I was growing my coaching business, I didn't suddenly wave a magic wand and I was a coach. I had to go through certification and I had to grow my business, and that took 2 years. So that was my paying my dues. So nobody gets out of it. But for me, because I knew what my long-term goal was, that 2 years was worth it. So that's how you figure it out.
That's awesome. Great advice. Thank you so much, Hallie. This has been a really, really helpful webinar, and I think a lot of people have tools now to go start finding their fulfillment or find out what that fulfillment looks like.
Very welcome. Thank you guys for being here today. It's my pleasure.
Thanks everyone for joining us. And like Hallie said, if you have any questions that come up later this afternoon or even a few days from now, please do reach out to her at admin@halliecrawford.com. Before the end of the day tomorrow, we'll be sending the full recording with this whole presentation so you can listen to this again. And again, feel free to look at our calendar at engage.emory.edu to find more webinars as well as some in-person events that might be in your area. We'd love to have you come out and mix with some other alumni and network and kind of find out where everybody is right now. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a great rest of your Wednesday, and we hope to see you again soon. Thanks. Thanks, Allie.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Have a great day.